Shawn Butler, co-founder and head of architecture and analytics at BNS. My journey in technology started back in 1996. Back then it was not much was happening in terms of high bandwidth speeds and feeds. Now if we start thinking about the world of data that we live in today, it's fascinating because data is being transmitted really all over the place in what we consider to be in a fully meshed topology. It's absolutely essential, and we look at it in a few different ways. Obviously, from a business perspective, any sector, arguably, even NGOs or nonprofits, they have to keep the lights on, right? So they're looking at ways to enhance maybe their applications give us the visibility we need for retention, customer satisfaction, new customers, and also gives us trends in terms of how we've been, I guess you could say, growing over the past month, how we will be growing in the next 3 months, and I'm talking, strictly revenue, strictly from a business perspective. The other area that I would say, unfortunately, doesn't get talked about as much is the realm of data risks, data risk management, data risk monitoring. So quite often, really what we're doing is, looking at mission-critical databases and servers that would construct and make up that application. Or for some organizations, you have 60 or 70 mission-critical applications that are not only catalysts for your revenue, but they're catalysts for your operations. If that application goes down, what happens? X, Y, Z, right? So if that application goes down, database has vulnerabilities, the server is compromised, you just lost or leaked data, that could be catastrophic for, any business. It really begins with data observability. And really what that means is looking at data. Some people will argue and say code is not data, but code is the building block and foundation, arguably the DNA for your applications, right? So there are solutions out there today that can look at code while it's in your code repo, whether you're using GitHub or GitLab, it really doesn't matter. If you've standardized on cloud service provider repos such as Azure or Google or AWS, observability is absolutely essential. You then understand the health and the hygiene of your data. I would also say that from a data architecture perspective, there are solutions out there that will, let's just say, expedite the pipelines, if you will, that are running into data warehouses and data lakes. And now we're seeing solutions out there that are converging data lakes and data warehouses into data lake houses, right? So it's really in the world of that data, and I'm not even going into production, but in the world of development and data science, certainly tons of advancements. So synthetic data, is data that may be generated for testing purposes. So when we talk about synthetic data, it's data that is just being, generated by a machine to inform different learning models. And machine learning takes on large language models, natural language processing, but there are two different, let's just call them, two different ways of learning and training those models. There are a multitude of ways, but supervised learning and reinforcement learning usually is what people will work with when we're trying to generate data and understand, let's just call it the data characteristics and the data function. AI agents come into play with both supervised learning and reinforcement learning. So for example, if I'm working in the realm of education and psychology, and I have a list of questions for different age groups and demographics, for example, I may want to use AI agents in conjunction with supervised learning and reinforcement learning on that specific model, on that list of questions, because the outputs will then be skewed and varied depending on the synthetic data that I'm using to train the model. With Gen AI, the challenge right now that we see is that there are different biases and prejudices, and there is a lack of critical discourse. So if I'm leaning one way, and I already have a bias in terms of political affiliations, ethics, culture, business morals, right? Certainly when I prompt the AI, my biases are going to come out, right? So when we talk about inclusion, really what we're talking about is education and bringing it really back to a level of critical discourse. Because if we keep having these biases and prejudices, we're just going to train the machines and the algorithms to be very slanted, and we unfortunately will exclude different groups of people. So diversity and inclusion is absolutely essential. And when we talk about real-time data, that is data that is, let's just say, generated from a multitude of different sources in real time. And I don't want to necessarily correlate real time as an analogy to production data, but it's probably the easiest way for people to grasp this very abstract concept of synthetic versus real-time data. So think of real-time data as data that's happening, just as it says, in real time in the world of production. Okay, so synthetic data, can it seep into the world of production data? Sure. If you're looking at any of these platforms right now, Microsoft, Apple, and how Gen AI is coming into the equation more and more, right? When we're talking about instant messaging, or just even Apple talking, being embedded, Gen AI in the phones, like what are the risks associated with that, and how natural is the data when it's in real time. But in the, let's just call it classic blueprint definition of natural data, right, or real-time data, we're talking natural data that has not been tampered or manipulated or adjusted with any synthetics, any AI intervention. That you would see typically in applications that you're interacting with on a daily basis. So if we're doing online banking or our streaming services that all of us know and love, that is real-time data. It's happening in real time. This is a question that every business probably tries to answer. So it really begins with grabbing data that enable the stakeholders to make more informed decisions. So this is where we get into the accuracy of the data. So what are your financial statements? What has revenue growth been like over the past 6 months? What are the projections for the next 6 months? And again, that's just, very basic, simple level. But it really begins with data inventory and data quality. Because if you don't have that, then you can't really make informed decisions about where do we go from here. When we talk about sustainability, I start thinking more about green buildings, materials management. So like if I'm in the world of supply chain manufacturing, I'm starting to think about carbon reduction, and that goes for any business. We all have a carbon footprint. That is one way I would say we can make this, world and planet a better place, make it a little greener.
I'm Kika von Klück, and I am a co-founder of BNS together with Shawn Butler. My role in the company is researching trends and innovation. When we're talking about what is the most interesting thing in terms of new business models, I would like to mention regenerative business models, which is different from sustainable. Sustainable means you can sustain yourself to growth, and eternal growth is impossible in nature, so you need to find ways to transform. Regenerative means you're making sure all parts of your business or entity is healthy. In a regenerative business model, you make sure that you're taking into account multiple forms of capital, not only profits. So your business is not existing for profits alone. It exists to make sure that you have human capital, you have knowledge capital, you have a understanding how to grow in collaboration, not in competition. It is important to use data, for instance, to understand key behavior indicators, together with key risk indicators and key performance indicators. Using data to measure, for instance, global climate change impact, rising of waters, air quality, or things like that can help you make a decision on to which sectors of your business you're influencing for the better or for the worse. So using data to inform how you are growing in one direction and neglecting other directions within your company would be helpful to improve your brand or to improve better health within your system, within your company. You can use mental health data, for instance, within the company to see where are the burnouts, who are being overworked, and to understand how people work within the system is essential. It's intricated with data collection, analytics, correlation, and making sense of what you have in your hands in order to improve from being sustainable to being regenerative.